It was smuggled past armed guards. It was once blamed for surviving the plague. In a single year, a poisoned version of it paralyzed tens of thousands of people, and almost no one remembers. Empires taxed it like gold. Traders lied about where it came from to keep the price sky high. And the drink you know today, the pale, fizzy one people reach for when they feel sick, was invented by a chemist trying to calm stomachs. Then it became the favorite drink of criminals. Here's the strangest part. Every year, the world grows more than 4 million tons of the root behind this story. And yet, after thousands of years of farming it, no one has ever found it growing wild. It has no home, no origin point in nature. This is the history of ginger ale. And it begins with a plant that only exists because humans refuse to let it disappear. Travel back more than 2,500 years to ancient China. There's a man named Confucius, philosopher, teacher, the most quoted human being in Chinese history. And according to the writings collected by his students, the Analects, Confucius had one rule at every single meal. He was never ever without ginger. Now, we should be careful here. These texts were written down long after his death. It's part record, part legend. But the detail survived for a reason. Even then, ginger wasn't just food. It was believed to sharpen the mind, warm the body, and drive out sickness. The trouble is, ginger doesn't grow on its own. It's a stubborn tropical root that has to be dug up, split, and replanted by hand, season after season. Which means someone, thousands of years ago, in the humid forests of Southeast Asia, chose to keep it alive. That single choice would echo across every empire on Earth. From China, ginger spread south and west, into India. And in India, it became something close to sacred. The healers of Ayurveda, the ancient medical tradition, gave ginger a title most spices never earned. They called it the great medicine, the universal remedy. Sore stomach, fever, nausea, cold in the bones. Ginger was the answer to all of it. It burned going down. And to those early physicians, that burn was proof. Proof that the root was doing something, pushing sickness out of the body. So ginger became a healer's tool first, a comfort, a cure, not a treat, not a party trick, medicine. Hold on to that idea, because everything this drink eventually becomes is a betrayal of how it began. And the moment ginger left Asia, it stopped being medicine and started being money. By the time of the Roman Empire, ginger had traveled thousands of miles overland to reach the Mediterranean, and it arrived shockingly expensive. We know this because of a Roman writer named Pliny the Elder. Pliny catalogued the world, and he was furious about one thing in particular. The fortune Rome was pouring east every year, chasing spices it couldn't grow. But why was ginger so expensive? Because the middlemen wanted it that way. The traders who carried ginger west, across deserts and seas, guarded one secret above all others, the source. Where did it actually come from? They wouldn't say. And so tales spread that spices grew in monstrous, faraway lands, guarded by beasts, at the literal edge of the world. It was a lie, a brilliant one. If no one knew where ginger came from, no one could cut out the middleman. That wall of secrecy held for centuries, until Europe decided to tear it down. For a long time, medieval Christian Europe treated Eastern spices with suspicion. Exotic, foreign, a little dangerous. Then the Black Death arrived, and attitudes changed overnight. As plague tore through Europe, ginger was suddenly reborn, not as a luxury, but as a shield. People believed its heat could fight the cold corruption of disease. Popular history even credits England's King Henry VIII with recommending ginger to ward off the sickness. We can't fully verify that story. Like a lot of Tudor legend, it's grown in the retelling. But the effect on the market was real. Ginger flew off the shelves. And the English took it one step further. They baked it into hard, spiced bread, gingerbread. Legend says Queen Elizabeth I had gingerbread shaped into the likenesses of her courtiers. The first gingerbread men. The suspicious foreign root was now baked into English identity. Europe was obsessed. And obsession creates ambition. For centuries, Whoever controlled the sea lanes to Asia controlled the price of every spice, including ginger. Then, in 1498, a Portuguese captain named Vasco da Gama did something no European had done. He sailed all the way around the southern tip of Africa and reached India by sea. Think about the risk: months on open ocean, crews dying of scurvy and thirst, charts that simply ended in blank space. Da Gama buried a huge portion of his men on that voyage, but he came back, and he came back with a route. Suddenly the old middlemen were finished. The secret was out. Ships could sail straight to the source and carry spices home by the hold full. Ginger, once worth a fortune, began to fall in price. It was becoming something ordinary, something common people could actually taste. But the boldest move wasn't sailing to ginger. It was stealing the plant itself and giving it a whole new world to grow in. Emotional peak. Slow the pace. Let it breathe. Here is the audacious part. Ginger is a living plant, and in the 1500s, the Spanish did something extraordinary with it. They took it across the Atlantic. Credit often goes to a Spanish colonist named Francisco de Mendoza, who is said to have carried ginger to the New World and planted it in strange foreign soil. Soil half a planet away from the forests, where it had lived for thousands of years. Picture that root sealed in a barrel of earth, crossing weeks of brutal Atlantic Ocean, salt spray, storms, everyone aboard betting it would survive. It did more than survive. It did more than survive. In the warm hills of the Caribbean, above all, in Jamaica, ginger thrived. It grew so well that within a generation the New World was shipping ginger back across the Atlantic to Europe. Let that sink in. A plant from the far side of Asia was now being exported by the Americas. Jamaican ginger became the gold standard on earth. Prized, pungent, famous. But that Caribbean success was built on a foundation the history books were slow to write down. Now, the root finally becomes a drink. In 1700s England, people started fermenting ginger, sugar, and water into a sharp, cloudy brew called ginger beer. It was rough, rustic, sometimes alcoholic. Then around 1851, a Belfast apothecary named Thomas Cantrell refined it into something bottled and sweeter, a dark, spicy soda he called ginger ale. But the version that conquered the world came from Canada. His name was John McLaughlin, a pharmacist and chemist from near Toronto obsessed with carbonated water. McLaughlin didn't want the heavy, dark, syrupy ginger ale everyone knew. He wanted something crisp, light, elegant. After years of tinkering, around 1904, he cracked it. A pale, dry, delicate ginger ale, trademarked a few years later as Canada Dry. He marketed it as the champagne of ginger ales, and that framing was genius. A soft drink that felt like a celebration. McLaughlin died in 1914. He never saw what came next, because in just a few years, a national disaster in the United States would turn his gentle health drink into the most wanted mixer in America. Tone shift, quieter. No music swell, we have to stop and be honest about that Jamaican ginger boom. The Caribbean ginger that made Europe rich was not grown by free, well-paid farmers. It was grown on colonial plantations, and for generations, that meant the forced labor of enslaved Africans, and later, indentured workers brought across the sea with little choice. The men who signed the export ledgers got their names in history. The people who dug the ginger from the soil, season after brutal season, almost never did. That's the quiet pattern behind so many everyday flavors. The spice is celebrated. The suffering that produced it is left out of the advertisement. Ginger ale would eventually become a symbol of comfort and cheer. But the comfort came at a cost that was paid by people whose names will never fully recover. And the drink's darkest chapter was still to come. The United States bans alcohol. Prohibition begins. And ginger ale, the innocent little health drink, suddenly has a secret job. Bootleg liquor tasted horrible, raw, harsh. But mix it with sharp, sweet, fizzy ginger ale, and the burn vanished. Canada Dry sales exploded. The drink invented to calm stomachs was now hiding illegal whiskey in glasses across the country, invented for medicine, adopted by outlaws. But there was a far darker loophole. A high-alcohol medicine called Jamaica ginger extract, nicknamed Jake, was still legal, and desperate drinkers swallowed it straight. In 1930, two bootleggers, Harry Gross and Max Reisman, adulterated their Jake with an industrial chemical to fool government tests and cut costs. That chemical attacked the nervous system. Tens of thousands of people, mostly poor, rural, and working class, lost control of their legs. They developed a stumbling, dragging gait the country nicknamed Jake Leg. Many never recovered. Ginger, the ancient healer, had been weaponized by greed, and it was the poorest who paid. After Prohibition ended, ginger ale had a quieter crisis. To make it cheap and consistent, big producers slowly stripped out the expensive part, the real ginger. Much of the ginger ale on shelves became little more than sweetened, flavored fizz, a soft drink that barely remembered the root it was named for. But it never fully died. One reason why is a stubborn survivor from Detroit. Back in 1866, a pharmacist named James Verner is said to have aged his ginger syrup in an oak barrel. Legend claims he left it there while he served in the Civil War and returned to find it mellow and delicious. We can't confirm every detail of that story, but Verner's ginger ale became one of the oldest soft drinks in America, and it never let go of that bold, real bite. Then in recent decades, a craft revival arrived. Small makers put actual ginger, sharp, spicy, alive, back into the bottle. The healer's root had come home. So the next time you crack open a cold ginger ale, for a sour stomach, on a plane, on a sick day, hold it a moment. You're not just drinking soda. You're drinking Confucius's daily habit. A plague-era shield. A root smuggled across an ocean in a barrel of dirt. The labor of people history tried to forget. A bootlegger's disguise, and a poison that crippled a generation. Thousands of years ago, a philosopher refused to eat a single meal without ginger, convinced it kept sickness away. Every can in every fridge on earth is the echo of that belief. The root with no wild home found a home in all of us, and it turns out the old sage was right all along.